This is lecture number 5. Today we are going to talk about morphology of permanent canines. Human canines are the longest and most stable of teeth in the dental arch. Only one tooth of this class is present in each quadrant. In traditional dental literature, canines are considered the cornerstones of the dental arch. They are the only teeth in the dentition with a single cusp. Maxillary canines, by definition, are the teeth in the maxilla, distal but closest to the incisors. Mandibular canines are those lower teeth that articulate with the mesial aspect of the upper canine. So the lower canine erupt before the upper canine. There is no type traits because we have only one canine in each quadrant. The class traits, these are the most stable teeth in the jaw, the longest and the thickest roots labiolingually, single conical cusp, as you can see, only cusped teeth without occlusal surface, which means they have a cusp but there is no occlusal surface. They support the arch and facial musculature. The arch trait, the upper is larger than the lower. It has a smaller inciso-cervical to inciso-cervical to mesodistal proportion in maxillary canine. The dimensions of the canines are mentioned in the table. Dimensions, the size and the eruption time is mentioned in the table I mentioned in the last lecture and will be handed to you in the laboratory too. The maxillary canine, as seen from the labial aspect, the canine is approximately 1 mm narrower than the central incisor. Its mesial aspect, as you can see here, resembles the adjacent lateral incisor, while the distal aspect here resembles the first premolar proximal to it. The canine is slightly darker or more yellow in the color than the incisors. The labial surface is smooth, with a well-developed middle lobe extending from the full length of the crown, from the cervix to the cusp tip. Which we call, and we'll see later, a buccal ridge. The cusp tip is on a line with the bisecting line of the tooth mesodistally, which means that it's in the center. Incisal outline has two sloping ridges, the mesial ridge sloping less markedly and it's shorter. The mesial ridge sloping from the cusp is shorter than the distal ridge. The mesial height of contour is at the junction between incisal and middle thirds. It's a little bit higher, like here, and the distal height of contour is in the middle of the middle. I don't think I have to draw the thirds again. You should be able to imagine them now. The mesial height of contour, I said that it's between the incisor and the middle third. The mesial outline is slightly convex, as you can see. It's slightly convex, even up from the contact point to the cervix too. The distal outline is markedly concave. If you come to the lab and see some of the demos we carved, you will see it apparently that it's curved concave. The distal cusp slope is straight, as I just showed you. It's longer and it's straight. The CEJ is slightly convex, cemento-enamel junction. Around the labial ridge, we have a little bit of depressions on the labial surface, which are more distinct. The depression is more distinct here on the distal side. The root is long and narrow, as you can see. From the distal aspect, the concavity on the root is deeper and longer. You have a less curvature of the CEJ. The incisal aspect is thicker labiolingually than mesodistally. The tip of the cusp is displaced labially to the central long axis of the tooth. It's asymmetrical, so if we have a midline like this, you will see that the distal half has a concavity on the labial surface more than the mesial half. The mesial half is almost convex. And you can see how prominent is the cingulum with a great convexity. The pulp, it looks like a double convex lens shape in labiolingual section, and it's widest near the cervix. As you can see, it looks like a double lens. In mesodistal section, as you can see, it's narrow and ovoid in cross section. How to tell right from left in this tooth? As I said, the distal surface is fuller and more convex than the mesial surface. The mesial contact point is at the junction. The mesial surface is fuller and more convex than the distal surface. The mesial contact point is at the junction of the incisal and the middle third. Distally, the contact is situated more cervically. It's in the middle of the middle. In some people, a cusp-like tubercle is found on the cingulum. Lingual pits occur only infrequently. On occasion, the root is unusually long or unusually short. These are the variations that can be seen in the maxillary canine. I would like you to go back to the reference book and take a look of all the pictures, illustrations, and photos of natural teeth. Try to apply these features we've talked about on these photos to have a more comprehended understanding of the morphology of this tooth. The mandibular canine, it's narrower mesodistally and labiolingually than the maxillary, which is an arch straight. Has a smaller mesodistal to inciso-cervical proportion, also an arch straight. From the labial surface, the crown length is equal or longer by 0.5 to 1 millimeter. The root is usually shorter, but sometimes is as long as the maxillary canine. The cusp is not as long and pointed as in the maxillary, which is an arch straight. As you can see, it's not so sharp. The labiolingual diameter of the crown and root is usually a fraction of a millimeter less. Mesodistally, it is narrower. The mesial cusp ridge is shorter and high adjacent to the cusp tip, as you can see here. The distal cusp ridge is lower, which means, by definition, that the contact point is heading toward the cervix. That's why the cusp ridge is taller. The mesial height of contour is just below the meso-incisal angle within the incisal third, as you can see here, while the distal one is between the incisal and middle thirds, as you can see here. The mesial outline under the contact point is straight, while it's convex distally. Anyway, the tooth converges toward the cervix, which means it becomes thinner toward the cervix. The crowns of the mandibular canines appear longer than the maxillary canines due to the narrowness of the crown mesodistally and the height of the contact areas above the cervix. The cusp tip is in line with the center of the root mesodistally, as on the maxillary canine, which means the cusp tip is in the middle. A distinctive feature is the nearly straight outline of the mesial aspect of the crown and root. What does that mean is, the crown and root mesially, they have the straight direction. You can draw a straight line out of the outline. Root is conical with a blunted apex, as you can see. The lingual aspect, the marginal ridges, the lingual ridge and cingulum, all of them are less prominent than that of the maxillary canine. The mesolingual and distolingual fossae are shallower. The lingual surface is smooth and regular. The lingual ridge, if present, is usually rather subtle in its expression, which means it's shallow or underdeveloped. Pits or grooves are rare. Roots are narrower lingually than labially. There is distinct longitudinal depressions that can be seen here. Look at your book on mesial and distal sides of the root. That extends actually from the lingual side. The root lingually actually narrows almost to half of the dimension of the root from the labial side. The mesial aspect, again, it's a triangle. The cusp tip is with the long axis of the tooth. The cervical third is narrower. Height of contours are just above the cervical line, and the entire labial outline is convex. So as you can see, height of contour is just above the cervix. Labially, you can see this outline is convex. The root is narrower and the root tip is more pointed. The cervical line curves more toward the incisal portion than in the maxillary canine. Mesial developmental depression is more pronounced than in the maxillary canine. Incisal portion of the crown is thinner labiolingually, as you can see here, which allows the cusp to appear more pointed and the cusp ridge to appear more cylinder. They are anyway underdeveloped, as we have explained earlier. When the crown and root are viewed from the proximal surface, this tooth uniquely presents a crescent-like profile similar to a cashew nut, which means when you see it from here, you see something like a C-shaped cashew nut, but that's not so important. The distal aspect is similar to the mesial. The cervical line curves less toward the incisal portion than in the maxillary canine. The incisal aspect, it's obvious that the mesodistal dimension is less than the labiolingual. The mesial and distal halves are more nearly symmetrical. Lingual outline is less round. It's less bulky appearance of the incisal edge. The cusp tip and the mesial cusp ridge are more likely to be inclined in a lingual direction, which is not something easy to notice or to take in consideration if you want to know which tooth is this. The pulp is similar to maxillary canine. Variations in this tooth. On occasion, the root is bifurcated near its tip. The double root may or may not be accompanied by depressions in the root. Double rooted mandibular canines are seen more often here in Jordan. So it would be nice to keep this information in your mind in the clinical years while you are working for patients. Take it in your mind that double rooted mandibular canine is often seen here in Jordan. The maxillary canine start to calcify between 4 and 5 months of the baby's life, while at the same time as the mandibular canine starts to calcify. The enamel is completed in both teeth between 6 and 7 years. The maxillary erupt after the mandibular, almost 11-12 years. The mandibular erupts around 9 to 10 years. Accordingly, the root of the mandibular is completed at 12 to 14, and the root of the maxillary is completed between 13 to 15 years. Canines of interest in other species is some interesting information to know. In mammals, canines are single-rooted teeth adapted for tearing food. They are often the largest teeth in the mouth. In humans, they are much reduced in size. This condition permits the side-to-side motion in the human chewing cycle. In many species, canines project well beyond the level of the other teeth and may interlock when the teeth are closed, preventing side-to-side motion. Rodents do not have canines at all. The tusks of the warthog, barberoussa, and the extant sabre-tooth cat are canines of dramatically increased size. The most typical offensive specialization in mammalian teeth is represented by the canines. Smilodon, the saber-tooth cat, is now extinct. Well known from La Brea in Los Angeles County, this spectacular animal had continuous growing maxillary incisors over 6 inches in length. This carnivore died out 10,000 years ago and may have been encountered by the first Americans who came from Siberia. The tusk-like canines were probably used to attack large, thick-skinned animals such as the mammoth and giant sloth. The walrus. A pinnipe related to seals and sea lions lives on a specialized diet of shellfish. All of its teeth are reduced to blunt, cone-like structures except for the tusk-like, continuously growing canines. They are used to scoop up seaweed and for locomotion on ice when out of the water. The baboons and sexual dimorphism. Among many animals, the tusk-like development of canines is a much more predominant feature in the male animal than in the female. Examples are the pigs, deer, baboons, and the anthropoid apes. In many animals, the larger and stronger tusks of the male animals are used in fighting, often the combat, for exclusive access to females. Baboons use them for threatening displays. As such, canines are social teeth. Horses present as unusual dental sexual dimorphism in females. The already reduced canines may be rudimentary or may be absent altogether. The pig family. They present highly developed weapon teeth. In wild pigs, the canines are huge tusks projecting outside the mouth cavity, while continue to grow and erupt throughout life. The male warthog has canines of the upper jaw that may turn upward and attain a length of 8 to 10 inches. They are used for digging roots and as formidable weapons in combat. In the Hebrides Islands, Aboriginal peoples will break out the upper canines, causing the lower ones to grow out into fanciful spirals that are used for ornamental purposes. The babirusa, the wild pig of Malaysia, has upturned canines in the upper jaw that are actual extraoral teeth that grow up through the roof of the snout. The teeth sweep back to the forehead, sometimes attaining a length of 17 inches. These remarkable teeth in the male are probably sexual ornaments. In the female, they are mere knobs. So, in a summary, you can go back to the same table found at the back of your reference book to summarize the arch traits of the canines. As I have already explained, there is no type traits for this tooth. There is only the arch traits. They are summarized in the table at the end of your book. That would be all for today. Next week we will start talking about the maxillary premolars. Wish you all the luck till next week.